Welcome back, everybody. I hope everybody had a great weekend. Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate all the effort. And I know it's kind of screwball, but we obviously find our way somewhere along the line. By the way, you know what? Brittany and I were talking earlier. I want to say something up front about it. Understand this. Uh-oh, there's a lot of noise out there. Okay. This is I don't consider myself a professional at this. And I also don't ever want to be considered a professional at this because I'm not in this to make money. So all the screwball stuff that Brittany we go through just to get this stuff out, it's because we're not doing this for a living. And you know what? I would worry about people that are doing it for a living. I don't want this to continue. In fact, everybody that makes money on this nonsense, I really wish the nonsense would go away, and then everybody that's making money on it sinks to the bottom because that's where they belong. They belong at the bottom. But anyway, that's just my opinion. So when I left you guys last Thursday, I was talking about possession as the root of title. I hope to God you actually read that because that's the general theme throughout everything I talk about. Everything I've been talking about from the beginning is based upon possession as the root of title. Now, in the short syllabus I sent everybody at the very beginning, I said that the third week would be about the illusory right to abandon. So, that's actually the document we're going to be covering, but the possession as the root of title, that document written by Richard Epstein, I hope you read that because that's ultimately what we're going to always be talking about. So I will always refer back to possession as the root of title somewhere along the next 4 weeks, actually. So thank you for reading that if you did. If you didn't read it, you need to read it. This week we're going to be talking about the illusory right to abandon, but what is it that's being abandoned? Well, what's being abandoned is land. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the land itself. But before I get into that, I want to tell a short story. I was at the bar last week, and I know you guys think that I'm at the bar all the time, and I'm actually there twice a week. But the point is that I was at the bar last week, probably Friday. And what's funny is I was sitting next to a young girl who had a lot of paperwork. By the way, I'm in a bar, and a young girl sets down all this paperwork, and she starts studying right next to me. What am I doing? I'm next to her reading a paper, a document. So she looks over at me, I look at her, and I go, "Are you studying for school?" And she said, "Yes." And I look at the paperwork, and it's biology. She's pre-med. And I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity for me. So we started talking about the afterbirth material. And because of her incredible background in this, she knew exactly what I was talking about. She knew about the fetal tissue versus the maternal tissue. She knew about all this stuff. And it was nothing new to her. The reason it's important is because all of this stuff is out there for people that actually know what's going on. And so we started talking about this document this thing that we're going to talk about this week, this illusory right to abandon, because it's all predicated upon it's predicated upon the land of your soul, which is your physical body or DNA. So that's what our conversation was about. Here's this 22-year-old girl at the University of Rockford or whatever the hell it's called, and all of a sudden she starts thinking, wow, I could see a problem there if there's fetal tissue that's abandoned in this waste material, and that fetal tissue represents you yourself, and somebody claims that, all of a sudden they have a legitimate claim upon you, and you should have seen her eyes. And so what I did is, it's funny because I have lots of extra documents around me. I carry at least 2 of everything with me because I'm so anal. Remember, triple Virgo. So, I had the illusory right to abandon with all my highlights and all my notes. And she says, wow, can I get that online? I said, you know what, you can have mine. So I gave her my document, and I know that it changed her world, or at least rocked it a little bit. But what's funny is, here's a girl that, because she's still immersed in the university system, I started talking to her about not just this aspect, but about vaccines and things like that. And she said, oh, no. Vaccines are safe and they're good for people. And I said, see, that's the problem, is that people are being taught at the university level, whether it's medicine or pre-med or whatever, that vaccines are decent, but they're not. And so all I wanted her to do, when I left her last week, I said, I just want you to really think hard. I mean, if something is toxic to the body, why is it allowed in a vaccine? Why is there a product, why is there a substance in the vaccine that is so incredibly harmful to the body? Why does it have to be in there? I said, why are there fillings, amalgam, with mercury? Why did they put mercury in my teeth? Why is there fluoride in the water? When all these substances are so toxic to the body or so detrimental to our existence, why are they in there? And then that's the only thing that got her to start to think. Because she believed the lie that the professors are telling her, just like the dentists and the oral surgeons believe that fluoride is good. You know what I mean? Or that amalgams with mercury in your mouth. One of the most toxic substances known to man, mercury, is actually placed in your mouth, in your teeth. See, it's hard to believe that these things are actually going on. I have one of the most toxic substances known to man in my mouth in the form of an amalgam filling. And they're still there. And they're probably still gassing off and still making me all goofy. Anyway, that was what I left her with. I said, you know what, you can believe whatever you want, but my only question to you is, if it's not required, why do vaccines have these incredibly toxic substances? Why do amalgams have one of the most toxic substances known to man in them? Why is fluoride in the water system? And that's the only thing that got her to start thinking. Anyway, that's besides the point. I just wanted to show you that the educational system is misleading everybody. They're all told the same lie as everybody else. But now very intelligent people are misled at the highest level, where they have to even have somebody sitting at the bar next to them open their minds up. You know, somebody thinking outside the box. Anyway, so let's get to tonight's work. Land. I sent out an email for everybody regarding the concept of land. I just found mine. Here it is. Okay, so before we get into that, let's get into the concept. The concept. So, and I've already had this discussion twice today. Name versus substance, or the title versus the land. Let's see what's the easiest way to describe this? Okay. So my wife Debbie makes a promise to Brittany that Kurt will come over and dig a hole in her yard. Now, Debbie, my wife, makes a promise saying Kurt will go over to Brittany's house to dig the hole. Well, is Kurt the name or the title? Is it substance or is it air? Is there anything behind the name Kurt? When Debbie says, yeah, I'll send Kurt over to dig that hole in your yard. Kurt, the name itself, is nothing more than a space holder or a promise. The name itself is nothing more than a promise. There's no substance at all to Kurt. And so when Debbie says Kurt will come over to dig a hole, is it even possible that Kurt, the name, can dig a hole? No. The name itself, the title, Kurt, cannot handle a shovel, cannot pick up a shovel, can do no work whatsoever. So Kurt, the name or the title, has no ability to perform anything. So when Debbie says, I'll send Kurt over to dig that hole in your yard, Brittany, what she's doing is she's creating a positive charge around the name Kurt. So Kurt is a promise, and the promise equals a positive charge. Yes, Kurt will dig a hole. That's a positive charge. Now there's a positive charge hanging over the name. The only way for the positive charge to be discharged is for the substance of Kurt to go over and dig the hole. Until the hole is dug, there's a positive charge. So until a physical substance, my physical body, shows up at Brittany's house and physically picks up a shovel and physically digs the hole and puts the energy into the substance and energy into the digging, and a hole is manifest. Until the hole is manifest, the promise of the name is not fulfilled. But once the hole is dug, then Debbie's saying Kurt will come over to dig the hole. The positive charge or the promise of Kurt digging the hole, once the hole is dug by the substance of Kurt, now it's discharged. Now the promise has been fulfilled. And what I'm trying to get at is that the name itself is a promise. It's a form of bond. So Debbie says Kurt will come over and dig the hole. That's a promise creating a positive charge. It's like a guarantee. But until I go dig the hole, there's kind of a debt. Debbie has created a debt for me. And until the hole is dug, the debt has yet to been paid. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is the name itself, by itself, is a promise. There needs to be something backing the promise to discharge the promise. When Debbie says Kurt will come over to dig the hole, she's just created a positive charge. When I go dig the hole, that's the discharge of that debt. Once the hole is dug, Debbie's promise has been fulfilled, and now we're back to equal. We're back to a zero balance. But once Debbie commits me and says Kurt will dig the hole, there's a positive charge. The moment I dig the hole, the charge has been offset or discharged, and now we're back to zero again. You got to think of the name as being a positive charge. And the only thing that can discharge the positive charge is the substance of the name. So Kurt is a title, or Curtis Richard Kallenbach is a title. The only thing that can discharge the promise of Curtis Richard Kallenbach is the substance of Curtis Richard Kallenbach, the physical substance or the land itself. You got to think of the land as the I'm trying to think of a word that makes sense. It's like a manufacturing plant. Again, let's go a different way. Let's think of it a different way. If the name of the company is Curtis Richard Kallenbach, and Curtis Richard Kallenbach promises 500 widgets to another company. In other words, they make a deal for 500 widgets. Curtis Richard Kallenbach now makes a promise to deliver 500 widgets. That's a positive charge. And until those 500 widgets are delivered to whatever company, there's an outstanding debt of 500 widgets. So the company itself, the manufacturing plant, has to produce 500 widgets in order to discharge the promise to deliver. And that's what the whole system is based upon. There's a name out there that is making promises that the substance must back up. The substance discharges the positive charge of the name itself. And that's the concept of the creditor and the debtor. The masculine's out there charging up a storm, and the substance or the feminine has to go behind it and discharge everything. Because nothing happens without the substance. Nothing happens without the substance. And that's the land. The land is the producer. of everything. Your physical body is the producer of everything. I jokingly say this almost every week to everybody I ever talk to. I can sit here and wish all night long for a beer. I'm sitting in my chair right now going, God, I wish I had a beer. And without the substance of my existence, the beer is never manifest. I can never physically ever experience the substance of beer unless I can get my physical body to go to the refrigerator and reach in and grab myself a beer with the hand. The substance of my existence, I can never experience anything without substance. So Kurt is no thing, is nothing. It amounts to nothing. Whereas my physical body, it is everything. I need both the title, Kurt, or Curtis Richard Kallenbach, and the land, my physical body, together in order to both charge and discharge everything. And remember that when the title, Curtis Richard Kallenbach, and the land, my physical body, are in one place at one time, there is no debt. Because everything I promise is fulfilled by everything I do. And in that moment, there is no negative charge. There's no negative balance. Everything is paid for when I actually physically complete the task. What they've done is found a way to separate those two things by, 13 days, because that's really what it is, 13 days. But I'm not going to go into that tonight. I'm just saying that they've created a space in time between the substance and the title where there's a debt. And then what they're doing is they're extracting an interest between those days. And that is where the usury comes in, and that's where all the money is extracted from the wealth of the people. Anyway, so let's get into land. Let's get into land. I put at P-Cloud a document called land. Wow, I just talked for almost 19 minutes saying almost nothing. I am pretty good at that. Okay, so land. We need to understand that land is the substance. Here we go. So I'm starting at the top. I'm going to try to get through this document tonight because it really is pretty amazing what land actually is. So land, in the most general sense, comprehends any ground, soil, or earth whatsoever, including fields, meadows, pastures, woods, moors, waters, marshes, and rock. In its more limited sense, land denotes the quantity and character of the interest or estate which a person may own in land. What does that mean? Land denotes the quantity and character of the interest or estate which a person may own in land. Quantity or character of interest. Well, quantity is obvious, but character of interest or estate which a person may own in land, a character of interest. Okay, let's keep going because we're going to come back to that. Land may include any estate or interest in land, either legal or equitable, as well as easements and incorporeal hereditaments. Okay, before we go too much further, let's understand what an easement is, the idea of an easement. An easement, in my case, and again, we've talked about this for the last 2 weeks. I am private. I, myself, the man sitting in this chair, is 100% private. But the stuff left behind in the hospital, i.e. the chorion, which is my DNA exactly, because it was picked up through eminent domain and placed into the public as a public charge, that becomes an easement into the public. Now there's a piece of me, not me, but a piece of me that falls under the care of the public. And it's inside the public realm, so to speak. There's a piece of me. It's an easement to my life. And unless I find a way to pull that out of the public, it stays in the public. And as long as it stays unclaimed and in the public, that piece of me is claimed by everyone in the public. So now, whatever I do, whatever I earn, anything I produce can be laid claim to by, through that easement, through that piece of me, by the public. And then it says either legal or equitable, as well as easements and incorporeal hereditaments. It says petition of Burnquist. Here's what's interesting is, it's funny because they show all these different cases. If you're looking at the document, it says all these different cases. What I found interesting, and I was just going through this morning, that it says petition of Burnquist, and then it says 220 Minnesota. That's Minnesota 220. They're actually using Minnesota 220 as an example of land in a case. Now, I didn't look into that case, but I don't need to. I'm just saying that it's actually documented right here in Black's Law 5th under the legal term of land. So they have 220 Minnesota right there in that. Now, let's finish up here. It says the land is one thing, and the estate in land is another thing. For an estate in land is a time in land or land for a time. This is a very difficult concept for most people. And I'm going to go over it again. On September 19th, 1960, at 3:50 a.m., I arrived at Swedish American Hospital through my mother's womb, according to the paper and 3 witnesses. When I say my, I mean I am. When I say I am, I mean the thing that identifies with that body. When I look in the mirror and I look at the thing that presents itself in the reflection, I know that what I'm looking at is not me. It's where I'm located. It's where I am located. The spirit of my existence is inside that thing. Because when I look at it, I know it's not me. In other words, I can feel the difference between me and it. I can comb its hair. I can let its beard grow. I can put on different clothes to make it look different. But the body itself is not I. I only am upon that land, that physical body. I only exist. I only exist on that land, that physical body, from the moment of my arrival, September 19th, 1960 at 3:50 a.m., until the heart stops beating. And then I will go somewhere else. The body or the land or the substance will go into the earth. But I will go somewhere else. So I'm trying to be clear here, I only am on that land for a period of time. So when I read the land is one thing, that's the physical body, and the estate in land is another thing. For an estate in land is a time in land, or land for a time. The Alpha and the Omega, the beginning of the moment I arrive to the moment that I leave, I only am in or upon this land for the amount of time that I am considered alive. To continue, technically, land signifies everything which may be holden. To hold something is to physically possess it, by the way. And the term is defined as comprehending all things of a permanent and substantial nature, and even of an unsubstantial, provided they be permanent. Ordinarily, the term is used as descriptive of the subject of ownership, and not the ownership. The subject of ownership and not the ownership. In other words, the very thing. When I look in the mirror, I see the body. I see the thing. That is the subject of ownership, not the ownership. Land is the material of the earth, whatever may be the ingredients of which it is composed, whether soil, rock, or other substances, or other substance, and includes free or occupied space for an indefinite distance upwards as well as downwards, subject to the limitations upon the use of airspace imposed and rights in the use of airspace granted by law. Okay, or other substances. Our physical bodies have the same material as Mother Earth. We're made of the same stuff, just organized a little bit different. And it says it includes free or occupied space for an indefinite distance upwards as well as downwards. Again, last week I think I said that right now I'm sitting in a chair as I speak. When I get up and move, when I get up out of this chair, the space that I occupied still exists in the chair. But the physical space that my physical body's occupying is now occupying another point in space. So again, it says includes free or occupied space for an indefinite distance upwards as well as downwards, subject to limitations upon the use of airspace imposed. So again, my physical body displaces. It actually takes up space. But even when I leave wherever I'm sitting, that space still exists. So the land I'm talking about is the land, the substance that is taking up the space. Now what's interesting, it says the term land may be used interchangeably with property. It may include anything that may be classed as real estate or real property. So when people talk of property, you know, what's funny is that for me, I know that when they say property, they can mean land. It can mean land. So, by the way, I took most of this straight out of Black Fifth. So if you were to follow along in Black Fifth, it's almost verbatim. I added a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm just telling you right now that if you were following along in Black's Law 5th edition, this is going to be alphabetical. Now, it says see also lands, ownership, parcel, partition, property, real estate, accommodation lands, bounty lands, certificate lands, crown lands, demesne lands, donation lands, fabric lands, general land office, land patent, mineral lands, place lands, public lands, school lands, seeded lands, swamp and overflowed lands, tide lands. What's interesting to me is I've, in 7 years, every one of these types of land has identified my physical body. Every one of them. I'm only going to cover 3 tonight. Parcel, partition, and general land office. So parcel, partition, and general land office, but I would advise everybody to look at this and look up bounty land. You want to know what a bounty hunter is? You want to know what a certificated land or a certificate land is? We already know what it is. In fact, when I say certificate, you know that it's the deed to a certain type of land. Donation lands. So you can look into those yourself, but I'm only going to cover parcel, partition, and general land office tonight. Let me grab some water here. Parcel. United Parcel Service. Parcel, a package. Parcel. A small package or bundle. Oh, bundle of joy. When baby's wrapped up and taken home, we talk about it as a bundle of joy. A bundle, which is no different than a package. It says a part or portion of land. So a package or bundle is a part or portion of land. part of an estate. Parcel, as used with reference to land, generally means a contiguous quantity of land in the possession of an owner. In the possession of an owner. Contiguous. It says United States for use. Okay, let's easements. Blah blah blah. A contiguous quantity of land in possession of, owned by, or recorded as property of the same claimant, person, or company. Same claimant, person, or company. Contiguous. We're going to get into that. Now, what I did is I went to parcel and I looked at all the different definitions of parcel in some format. Parcelliterne, a parcel of land. Parcel makers, in Old English law, 2 officers in the exchequer who formerly made the parcels or items of the excheater's accounts, wherein they charged them with everything they had levied for the king during the term of their office. Parcels, plural, a description of property formally set forth in a conveyance, together with the boundaries thereof, in order to its easy identification. Identification. You need to look that up. Parcels, bill of parcels, an account of the items composing a parcel or package of goods transmitted with them to the purchaser. Parcenary, the state or condition of holding title to land jointly by parceners before the common inheritance has been divided. Before the common inheritance has been divided. Remember, people, that there are 3 products of mothers of the birth process. 3. Firstborn is baby. That's baby. The firstborn product, which is the product of mom and dad's DNA. And then comes the afterbirth. And the afterbirth has 2 constituent parts. The chorion, which is fetal tissue, which is identical to baby, and the maternal afterbirth tissue, which is mother's DNA alone. So there are 3 potential claimants. And so it says parcenary, the state or condition of holding title. Remember, there's 3 positions, baby, chorion, and maternal afterbirth. But there's only one title. Curtis Richard Kallenbach is the only title to all 3 positions. It says the state or condition of holding title to lands jointly by parceners before the common inheritance is divided. Common inheritance. There are 3 claimants to the inheritance or the title of Curtis Richard Kallenbach. Baby, chorion, and maternal afterbirth tissue, the maternal tissue. 3 potential claimants. Parcener, a joint heir, one who with others hold an estate in co-parcenary. Again, how many people how many true people have a legitimate claim to Curtis Richard Kallenbach? How many? Well, baby, which is me at this point, is the only living legitimate claimant. The chorion, which is my DNA, is part of my claim. So if I make the claim properly and through the chorion, remember there are 3 potential claimants, which means 33% to me, baby, 33% to the chorion, and 33% to the maternal afterbirth. When I pull the chorion into my position and make a legitimate claimant, I am 66 2/3%, or what's known as majority. And remember, there are 3 of us, so there are joint heirs to this title. Okay, so let's get to contiguous. Contiguous, in close proximity, neighboring, adjoining, near in succession, in actual close contact, touching at a point or along a boundary, bounded or traversed by. But here's what's interesting. It says the term is not synonymous with this vicinal, as in vicinity, vicinal. It is not synonymous with vicinal. Now I want to ask you something. So dad's sperm fertilizes mother's ovum, and now those two things now become one, called a zygote. One single circle. You got to think of it as a single circle. When the circle starts to subdivide and a piece of it comes off, separates itself within the circle itself, are they joined? Yes, they are. And so that thing, that zygote now plants itself in the uteral wall of mother. So you got this thing, the sphere, the circle, planting itself in the wall of mother. Now you have three different positions. Baby, and the chorion, which is subdivided within that zygote, and you have now the maternal tissue. You got to think of these three different positions. And are they neighbors? Are they connected? Are they in close contact? It says the term contiguous is not synonymous with vicinal. So what's vicinage? Neighborhood, near dwelling, vicinity. In modern usage, it means the county where a trial is had, a crime committed, etc. Also a jury of the county wherein a trial is held. Understand where we're going with this. Just hang in there. Vicintum, the neighborhood. Vicinage, the venue. The venue. Vicinity, quality or state of being near or not remote. Nearness. Propinquity, proximity, a region about near or adjacent, adjoining space or country. Neighborhood, etymologically, by common understanding. Common understanding. It admits of a wider latitude than proximity or contiguity, and it may embrace a more extended space than that line contiguous to the place in question, and is applied to towns or other territorial divisions may embrace those not adjacent. Let me explain what that just said. If I am a citizen, I'm going to use the word citizen so people can sort of connect with it. If I'm a citizen of Rockford, let's say, and I have rights and duties to Rockford, Illinois, and I'm in France, and I go to France, and I'm on vacation in France, I'm still tied. Even though I'm in France, I'm still tied to my rights and duties and privileges and immunities in Rockford. I'm still tied to it, even if I'm in France. So regardless of where I go in the world, I'm still tied to that place because of the vicinity, the concept of vicinage, my community, my neighborhood, the hood itself. I'm from the hood. So because I'm from the hood, I'm connected to the hood. And whatever's happening in the hood is happening to me. Here's an interesting Latin term. Vicini, vicinoria, presumptor scier. Persons living in the neighborhood are presumed to know the neighborhood. Presumed to know the neighborhood. If you're a party to something and you're subject to the rules of whatever that is, it doesn't matter whether you know it or not. You're presumed to know it. Even if you don't know you're a citizen of the District of Columbia, the neighborhood, so to speak, you are subject to the rules of that neighborhood, that municipal corporation. You are subject to it even if you don't know it because you're presumed to know it. So if somewhere along the line You are connected to this hood, this neighborhood. You're subjecting yourself to it. Even if you don't know it, you're presumed to know it. There's your presumption right there. Back to the concept that says neighborhood, near dwelling vicinity. In modern usage, it means the county. The county. So what does the parish mean here? It says in English ecclesiastical law, a circuit of ground committed to the charge of one person or vicar or other minister having the cure of souls therein, the precinct of the parish church, and the particular charge of a secular priest, an ecclesiastical division of a town, city, or district subject to the ministry of one pastor. In Louisiana, a territorial governmental division of the state corresponding to what is elsewhere called a county. So, a county and a parish are the same thing. But I'm going to go over this paragraph because it's really important to understand this. Just remember that wherever you see the word county, you can exchange it for the word parish. County and parish are the same thing. Okay, now look, let's go back to this paragraph for a second. It says in English ecclesiastical law, a circuit of ground committed to the charge of one person. And this is one of the most important things to understand. Your physical body, your very DNA, is the gist or the ground upon which your soul exists. It's the ground. It is the land of your soul. And the only one that has its charge, the only one that is responsible for it is you. So it says in ecclesiastical law, a circuit of ground, i.e. your body, committed to the charge of one parson or vicar, you or the vicar. Either you're in charge of it or the vicar is in charge of it. It says, or other minister having the cure of souls therein. The cure of souls. Meaning that you need to have a place or a home for your spirit. Some place for your spirit to call home. If you don't have a place for that spirit, it needs to go someplace else. It needs to have a home someplace else. It says the precinct of a parish church and the particular charge of a secular priest. Secular priest. They're not talking about religion here at this point. They're talking about somebody in charge of the soul. Somebody in charge of the soul. So let's keep going. Partition. Remember that there are only 3 words that I'm dealing with here for land, and that's parcel, partition, and general land office. Partition. The dividing of lands held by joint tenants, co-parsoners, or tenants in common into distinct portions so that they may hold them severally. Okay, back to the product of mother's womb. There are 3 separate products of the birth. There's baby, there's chorion, and there's maternal. Those are 3 distinct claims. 3 distinct claims. And so it says the dividing of lands held by joint tenants, co-parsoners, or tenants in common. Tenants in common. If you're not pulling all of those positions into one place, there are 3 separate claimants. You, firstborn baby, the chorion, which is your DNA without a soul, and maternal afterbirth, which is mother's product alone. And the Roman Catholic Church claims that exclusively. So you have you, a claimant, the chorion, unclaimed or derelict, and then the church claiming its vessel, the maternal or the female side of the equation through the mitochondrial DNA. You claiming no claim upon your DNA, and the church claiming the mother side. 3 potential positions. It says, and in a less technical sense, any division of real or personal property between co-owners, resulting in individual ownership of the interests of each. Does it make any sense? If you think about those 3 potential positions, how many really true positions are there? There's only one. You, the living man or woman. There's only one. And yet what they've done through the concept of born alive is they made it possible for 3 different positions. 33% you have, the chorion has 33%, which is unclaimed, and the maternal, which is 33% claimed by the church. The only thing that has to be won over is the chorion. If you claim the chorion as your DNA, your property, then you have your 33% plus the chorion, which is 66 2/3% or the majority. If you do not claim your property, the chorion, then the church claims all of the afterbirth, which is the maternal side, 33%, and the chorion, which is 33%. Now the church has 66% claim to your birth. And they win in court every time because they have the majority. They are the majority stakeholder at that point. It says division between several persons of property which belong to them as co-owners. Bullshit. There's only one living man, and you better claim it. It may be compulsory or judicial or voluntary. By the way, compulsory is going to come up in 2 weeks. It says commonly the court will order the property sold and the proceeds divided instead of ordering a physical partition of the property. It's called alopecia partition. Now there's the partition or deed of partition. In conveyancing, a species of primary or original conveyance between 2 or more joint tenants, co-parceners, or tenants in common, by which they divide the land so held among them in severalty, each taking a distinct part. Bullshit. And I'm saying this so you understand that there is a legitimate 3 pieces to the birth process. Curtis Richard Kallenbach has 3 potential claimants. Baby, chorion, which is the derelict or the I call it the Rain Man position, or the maternal side, which is mom's property alone. Partition of succession. The partition of a succession is the division of the effects of which the succession is composed among all the co-heirs according to their respective rights. Partition is voluntary or judicial. It doesn't have to be either. There doesn't have to be a partition. See, what they're doing right now is they're making it impossible for anybody to make a claim upon the afterbirth. See, the afterbirth is the only partition. The partition ultimately is between you and the piece of you that has been severed or cut off, which is the chorion, the fetal tissue. That's the only partition. Partition is voluntary or judicial. It is voluntary when it is made among all the co-heirs present and of age, and by their mutual consent. I don't know how anything can be consensual when you don't know the whole story. But that's what it's called. It's called to remember. It said it is judicial when it is made by the authority of the court and according to the formalities prescribed by law. Every partition is either definitive or provisional. Definitive partition is that which is made in a permanent and irrevocable manner. Provisional partition is that which is made provisionally either of certain things before the rest can be divided, or even of everything that is to be divided when the parties are not in a situation to make an irrevocable partition. In other words, it's an unknown thing. It's an unknown quantity. Nobody knows yet. And here's Latin. It says partitio. Latin in the civil law, partition or division. Remember, this is about divide and conquer. This word does not always signify Dimidium, a dividing into halves. This is not halves, this is thirds. Baby, chorion, and maternal. There are 3 parts to this petition, or 3 parts to the potential. Partitio legata, in the civil law, a testamentary partition. This took place where the testator, in his will, directed the heir to divide the inheritance and deliver a designated portion thereof to a named legatee. A named legatee. This is where it gets interesting to me, as far as the United States goes. As far as the United States goes, got to grab some water here. Here's what I believe, just so you know. And I'm going to back it up with this government land office information real quick. I believe that when mom walks into the hospital and doesn't declare the package in her womb, she never stops by customs to declare it. So it's an unknown thing in that federal territory called hospital. She delivers the baby, and she delivers the chorion, and she delivers the maternal afterbirth. She takes baby home. So baby goes home, nobody knows anything about it. But what she leaves behind is the chorion, which is the DNA of baby, and the DNA of mother, which is the maternal afterbirth. And she leaves a title, Curtis Richard Kallenbach. I believe the only way that I can lay claim to my birthright in the United States of America is if I claim the chorion that appeared or fell upon the soil of Illinois in that hospital. Just like Haslam versus Lockwood, when the horse's poop dropped to the ground, the very first claimant, the only other claimant other than the owners of the horse, is the owner of the fee. The fee is the land. So when the afterbirth hits the ground, so to speak, the only other potential claimant, the only other one that can say, yeah, it's here, is Illinois. If I don't claim what hits the soil of Illinois as baby, and as the owner of the chorion, which is my DNA, I do not have a place of birth. If baby goes home and has no identification, no foot on the ground, so to speak, if baby gets carried home and never makes a legitimate claim to the soil of Illinois, baby is stateless forever. When I lay claim to the chorion, which fell to the earth, we'll call it Illinois, when I lay claim, make a legitimate claim through Minnesota Rule 220, I now am part of the people of Illinois. When I lay claim to the chorion, i.e. my DNA, on the soil of Illinois, I am now one of the people born to the soil of Illinois, which is within the Republic. And now I'm known as one of the people, and I get to fly the flag of the United States of America. Now I'm no longer stateless. But the only way I'm not stateless is to lay claim to the product that was left behind on the soil of Illinois. If I don't lay claim to that product, the afterbirth product called chorion, I'm not here. And if I'm not here, I'm nowhere. And if I'm nowhere, I'm as good as gone, missing, presumed dead. That's my understanding of what's going on here. So let's get into the General Land Office, and I'm going to start backing some of this up with their definition. And this is really interesting to me too, because the value. The value of the United States of America, all of its only value is the production of its land. In other words, the timbers, the gold, the silver, everything that's found on the soil, in the soil, the allodium of the United States of America is the value of the country itself. That's the only value of the United States of America is the land. So, Government Land Office. Formally, an office of the United States government being a division of the Department of Interior, having charge of all executive action relating to the public lands, including their survey, sale, or other disposition, and patenting. originally constituted by an act of Congress in 1812. The General Land Office and the U.S. Grazing Service were consolidated into the Bureau of Land Management under the Department of Interior by 1946 Reorganization Plan Number 3. It says, see Bureau of Land Management. The General Land Office was an independent agency of the United States government responsible for public domain lands in the United States. It was created in 1812 to take over functions previously conducted by the United States Department of the Treasury. It was created in 1812 to take over functions previously conducted by the United States Department of Treasury. Everything in the United States, the entire value of the United States, the Treasury of the United States is its allodium or land. That's all of it. They have no other claim. Starting with the passage of the Land Ordinance of 1785. When was the Declaration of Independence? 1776? Oh, 9 years later, the Land Ordinance of 1785. 4 years before the Constitution, which created the Public Land Survey System. The Treasury Department had already overseen the survey of the Northwest Territory, including what is now the state of Ohio. Placed under the Department of the Interior, when the department was formed in 1849, it was merged with the United States Grazing Service, established in 1934, which is an interesting date all by itself. 1934 is the year after the land deeds called birth certificates were issued. It says to become the Bureau of Land Management on July 16, 1946. The Government Land Office oversaw the surveying, platting, and sale of public lands in the western United States and administered the Homestead Act and the Preemption Act in the disposal of public lands. By the way, notice they're always talking about public land. Now let's go back to this for a second. When baby's born, that's a private baby getting taken home with mom and dad in the swaddling clothes, never to be heard from again. But the land left behind, the DNA left behind, the land of your soul, albeit soulless because the soul is in you, in baby, the DNA left behind, and the maternal DNA, mother's DNA, is left behind in the hospital. It's picked up through eminent domain and put into the public. It's on deposit as public lands. It becomes an easement. But it is taken up through eminent domain. It goes on to say the frantic pace of public land sales in the 19th. By the way, we need to. Right now, everybody's screaming, Kurt, come on, man! They didn't know any of this shit back then. Bullshit. The afterbirth has been around since the very first birth ever. All the mystics, everybody knew that there was this other stuff that comes out of mother's womb every time. The Romans used to actually bury it, give it a service. They knew this stuff 6,000 years ago. This is nothing new. So don't think that 200 years ago they didn't know this. What they're doing, what they did, when they created the United States of America, they did something very, very interesting. And I'm going to get into that tonight. Hopefully I have time. So anyway. The frantic pay, blah, blah, blah. The American West led to the idiomatic expression land office business, meaning a thriving and high-volume trade, blah, blah, blah. Here we go. An extension of the homestead principle in law, the Homestead Acts were an expression of the free soil of Northerners who wanted individual farmers to own and operate their own farms, as opposed to Southern slave owners who wanted to buy up large tracts of land and use slave labor, thereby shutting out free white men. The homestead principle is the principle by which one gains ownership of an unowned natural resource by performing an act of original appropriation. I'm going to go over this 1,000 times tonight until you get it. The homestead principle, This is not the Homestead Act. You got to look up Homestead Principle. It says the Homestead Principle is the principle by which one gains ownership of an unowned natural resource by performing an act of original appropriation. Unowned. Unowned. So when the afterbirth falls to the ground, who's claiming it? Who claims the afterbirth? It's unowned. At that moment, it goes unowned. Both the chorion and the maternal afterbirth are unowned. It says the Homestead Principle is the principle by which one gains ownership of an unowned natural resource. I'm talking about the chorion right now. Or even the maternal, by performing an act of original appropriation. Original appropriation. That's the birth record. It says appropriation could be enacted by putting an unowned resource to active use, as with using it to produce a product, joining it with previously acquired property, or by marking it as owned, as with livestock branding. Livestock branding, what is that? If I put a brand, I don't know, call it the Kallenbach Farm, or the Kallenbach Ranch, or KR, and I put it, and I fashioned a branding iron, and I put it into my head, Kallenbach. Do you realize that my physical body is nothing more than an animal? My physical body. It's the beast of burden. It's my responsibility. My physical body is the beast of burden in my life. It's a beast of burden. Nothing more than an animal. But look what it says here. Previously acquired property, or by marking it as owned. Marking it as owned. Giving it a name. Marking it as owned. Giving it a name. Give that material a name. Call it Kallenbach. Now, the afterbirth has a name. It's marked. It's branded. But let's go over this again. It says an unknown resource. Put it to active use. Joining it with previously acquired property, baby's acquired by me. It's mine. It's me. It says by marking it as owned. Give that property, give that other afterbirth material title, Curtis Richard Kallenbach. You have now branded it. The problem is somebody has to claim it. It's branded, but it's unowned. I need to physically appropriate it. I need to gain ownership of it. I need to actually perform an act of original appropriation. I need to do it. The state does it. They absolutely do it. But it's not theirs to claim. It's mine to claim. It says proponents of intellectual property hold that ideas can also be homesteaded by originally creating a virtual or tangible representation of them. Do you see this? A virtual or tangible representation of them. Again, Curtis is not the substance. Curtis is a name. Until the substance exists, Curtis is irrelevant. Others, however, argue that since tangible manifestations of a single idea will be present in many places, including within the minds of people, this precludes their being owned in most or all cases. Homesteading is one of the foundations of the Rothbardian anarcho-capitalism. That's a very interesting read, by the way. You should do that. The Government Land Office was placed under the Secretary of Interior when the Department of Interior was formed in 1849. Reacting to public concerns about forest conservation, Congress in 1891 authorized the President to withdraw timberlands from disposal. I'm going to go to the next page. It says, the Establishing Act of Congress passed in 1789, read in part. This is page 5, by the way, at the top. It says, it shall be the duty. By the way, remember, in 1790, 1 year later, what came out in 1790 that I briefly touched on last week? The Copyright Act of 1790. What is the Copyright Act talking about? Number one, they talked about, the most important thing that I saw was the concept of the book. A book is a registry, by the way, and it can be a registry of titles. So look at what it says here. Establishing Act of the Congress passed in 1789, which is 1 year before the Copyright Act of 1790. It says, it shall be the duty of the Secretary of Treasury. And remember, the Secretary of Treasury is tied to what? The Government Land Office. To execute such services relative to the sale of the land belonging to the United States. Belonging to the United States. As it may be by law required of him to make, report, and give information to either branch of the legislature in person or in writing, as he may be required, respecting all matters referred to him by the Senate or the House of Representatives, or which shall appertain to his office, and generally perform all services relative to finances as he shall be directed. Let me say this about the Declaration of Independence. You want to participate in the world that they were creating in 1776, where it says, and to these ends we do what? Our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. In other words, we're putting something at stake. The United States, by the way, I'm going to say this, and most people won't get it yet, but eventually they will. The United States is the people. The United States of America is the people. It's the people themselves. And it's the two states united, being the church and state within each and every one of us. We are the United States. The people are the United States. It's not the land underfoot. It's the people that are the United States of America. That's what gives it its beauty. It says the current law, 31 U.S.C. 301, reads as follows, blah, blah, blah. This is interesting stuff here. The beginning point. By the way, I put the Wikipedia links in here so you could read the entirety of the Wikipedia links, because when you understand what they're trying to say here, the beginning point of the U.S. Public Land Survey is a monument at the border between the U.S. states of Ohio and Pennsylvania. On the north side of Ohio, on the north side of the Ohio River. It is near the three-way intersection of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and the northern tip of West Virginia, in both the Pittsburgh metropolitan area and the East Liverpool micropolitan area. It is significant as being the point from which the public land survey system was performed, starting in 1785. So everything beyond this point is the public land, is part of the public land survey. It says the survey was the first mathematically designed system to nationally conducted cadastral survey in any modern country, and is an object of study by public officials of foreign countries as the basis for land reform. It was conducted in the late 18th century. Anyway, land reform. What is land reform? It says land reform, also agrarian reform, though it can have a broader meaning. Hang on a second. Let that let that go past. Involves the changing of laws, regulations, or customs regarding land ownership. So this is land reform. Customs regarding land ownership. Land reform may consist of a government-initiated or government-backed property redistribution, generally of an agricultural land. Land reform can therefore refer to transfer of ownership from the more powerful to the less powerful, such as a form of relatively small number of wealthy or noble owners with extensive land holdings, plantations, large ranches, agribusinesses, plots, to individual ownership by those who work the land. Such transfers of ownership may be with or without compensation. Compensation may vary from token amounts to the full value of the land. What's funny is a couple of years ago, I started talking about the BAR, B-A-R. And what I discovered was the BAR does not mean what most people think it does. It means British Agricultural Revolution. When you understand what's going on, and remember, the British Agricultural Revolution is about livestock and land, farmlands. Livestock and farmlands. So let's keep going here. And then, by the way, I put the link into the BAR, the British Agricultural Revolution. I'm really hoping I get through this tonight. Land reform may also entail the transfer of land from individual ownership. By the way, individual. The legal name of an individual is not the same as the legal name of a man. The individual name is first, middle, last, which is the title to the birth material left behind in the hospital. So the word individual, it says land reform may also entail the transfer of land from individual ownership, even peasant ownership in small holdings, to government-owned collective farms. Government-owned collective farms. I call America the state farm, or all state. It's a giant insurer. It's a giant insurance claim. But it says, may entail the transfer of land from individual ownership. Individual is Curtis Richard Kallenbach. That's the title of the individual. So transferring something from that, Curtis Richard Kallenbach, to what? To government-owned collective farms. It is also in other times and places referred to the exact opposite, division of government-owned collective farms into small holdings. The common characteristic of all land reforms, however, is the modification or replacement of existing institutional arrangements governing possession and use of the land. Thus, while land reform may be radical in nature, such as though large-scale transfers of the land from one group to another, it can also be less dramatic, such as regulatory reforms aimed at improving land administration. Nonetheless, any revision or reform of a country's land laws can still be an intensely political process, as reforming land policy serves to change relationships within and between communities, as well as between communities and the state. Thus, even small-scale land reforms and legal modifications may be subject to intense debate and conflict. That's what's happening in court. It's all about the land being transferred from the individual to somebody else. In probate, by the way. Okay, so let's finish up this by going through some incredible terms, some legal terms here. This is all out of Black's Law, and I wanted to stay with the concept of land tonight. So landa, an open field without wood, a lawn or lawn. Landrica, landagende, and landafort. In Saxon law, a proprietor of land, or lord of the soil. By the way, who's the lord of your land? I've said this before, that little drawing of that ship with the captain, the boat, and the wind. The landlord over your physical kingdom is your mind. That is the lord of that kingdom. Your body is your mind. Your mind is the lord over that land. Land bank. A federally created bank under the Federal Farm Loan Act, organized to make loans on farm security at low interest rates. By the way, if you go up to these small holdings and land reform, you got to think of this farm. There's one state farm, and your physical body is part of that farm, or not, depending on your claim or non-claim. Organized to make loans on farm security at low interest rates. May also describe program in which land is retired from agricultural production for use in conservation or in a tree cultivation, and as such is sometimes called a soil bank. Landbach. In Saxon law, a charter or deed by which lands or tenements were given or held. Land boundaries. limits of land holdings described by linear measurements of the borders or by points of the compass or by stationary markers. It's interesting. It says boundaries, 40, landmark, land measure, legal description, meets and bounds, plat map, section. I always call the afterbirth a C section. Why? A Caesarean section. In other words, Caesar's section. By the way, I hope everybody knows that the legal or the concept or the term or C-section itself means abortion. A C-section is legally called an abortion. I know lots of people that are considered abortions based upon the fact that they were born through C-section. They probably wouldn't take kindly to me calling them an abortion. Land certificate. This is important. An obligation of government entitling owner to secure designated quantity of land by following the requirements of law. I believe that the land certificate itself is your claim to a piece of land inside the United States of America, making you one of the people subject or protected by the Constitution and Bill of Rights. The land certificate is your claim to being inside the United States of America and not an alien, which is what Donald Trump's been talking about a lot lately, including the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's been talking about aliens and the fact that there's no due process for those outside the United States of America. If you don't lay claim to this land, the certificated land, you are an alien or a stranger or an outlaw to the United States of America. And you're going to be treated accordingly very soon. And all these Americans, so-called, that are screaming for the aliens to be thrown out of the country don't realize that they are an alien as an American. The only way you're going to be saved is by claiming your plot of land, your piece of land inside the United States of America. If you don't do that, there is no evidence that you are flying that flag. Let me finish with land certificate. This might be the most important definition of the night. An obligation of government, not you, an obligation of government, entitling owner to secure designated quantity of land by following the requirements of law. It contains a description of the land as it appears on the register and the name and address of the proprietor and is prima facie evidence of the truth of the matters therein set forth. There's your certificate of live birth right there. The certificate of live birth identifies me as one of the people of Illinois. It's the truth of the matter. Land cheap. In Old English law, an ancient customary fine paid either in money or cattle at every alienation of land within some manner or with the liberty of some borough. When you go into that courtroom and you let go and you don't claim that land properly, don't you end up paying a fine? That's because you've alienated the very thing that secures your position within that courtroom. You are not secured without that claim, without a proper claim, without standing. Land contract. Contract for the purchase and sale of land upon execution of which title is transferred. Term commonly refers to an installment contract for the land, the sale of land whereby purchaser receives the deed from the owner upon payment of final installment. The vendor retains title to the property as security for payment of contract price. May also be called contract for deed or installment land contract. We don't know it, but that's what we're the vendor. We're acting as vendors in that courtroom. Land cop. I think this is kind of funny, actually. The sale of land, which was evidenced in early English law by the transfer of a rod or festuca as a symbol of possession, which was handed by a seller to the reeve and by the reeve to the purchaser. Remember the shire reeve, the sheriff? The conveyance was made in court. It is supposed for the securing better evidence of it and barring the claims of expectant heirs. Listen, barring the claims of expectant heirs. I put this other term in here, right under here for a reason, expillatio. Expillatio. In the civil law, the offense of unlawfully appropriating goods belonging to a succession. It is not technically theft because such property no longer belongs to the decedent, nor to the heir, since the latter, i.e. the heir, has yet taken possession. In other words, you're the heir, and yet you've not taken possession. It says, in the common law, the grant of letters testamentary or letters of administration relates back to the time of the death of the testator or intestate, so that the property of the estate is vested in the executor or administrator from that period. In the expillator, in the civil law, a robber or spoiler or plunderer. It says, since the latter has not yet taken possession. They're talking about you, the heir. The decedent is the afterbirth. Until you take possession, somebody else steps in and appropriates your life, your name, your title, your land. It also says expillator down here at the bottom in the civil law, a robber, a spoiler, or plunderer. Well, what's funny is if you go to Article 38 of the Liber Code, which I'm going to do right now just because I'm thinking about it, it used the word spoiler. It says in the civil law, a robber, a spoiler, or plunderer. So let me just go to Article 38 real quick. Liber Code. Hang on. Liber Code, Article 38. I know I go over this all the time, but it's important that we keep doing this. Article 38, right here. Private property, unless forfeited by crimes or offenses of the owner, can be seized only by way of military necessity for the support or other benefit of the Army or of the United States. If the owner has not fled, the commanding officer will cause receipts to be given, which may serve the spoliated owner to obtain indemnity. In other words, the property was taken from you. I'm talking about the afterbirth was taken. In other words, you're the spoliated owner. Property was taken from you. But what did they give you? They gave you something. They gave you an indemnity policy, which is the birth record. And that's what it says up here, expillator. In the civil law, a robber, a spoiler, or plunderer, you now have the ability, you're fully indemnified for that taking, as long as you have not fled. The only way you can claim the indemnity position is if you have not fled. You have to retain possession and make sure everybody knows you're not leaving it behind. Land court. In Massachusetts, such court has the exclusive original jurisdiction of all applications for registration of title to land within the Commonwealth and power to hear and determine all questions arising from such applications. It has exclusive original jurisdiction over writs of entry and various petitions for clearing title to real estate. Clearing title to real estate. Of petitions for determining validity and extent of municipal zoning ordinances, bylaws, and regulations, original, concurrent, general equity jurisdiction in matters relating to land, except in cases of specific performance of contracts relating to same. Exclusive original jurisdictions of proceedings for foreclosure of and redemption from tax titles. And it is original jurisdiction concurrent with Supreme Judicial, Superior, and Probate Courts of declaratory judgment proceedings. Land damages, see damages. Land Department, see Bureau of Land Management. Land description, see land boundaries. Land district. A division of a state or territory created by federal authority. Created by federal authority. Do you remember that the document I got back from the Attorney General said that this matter is not a matter for the federal government or the Department of Justice. What is the Department of Justice? It is the legal head or the legal department of the executive branch. The Department of Justice is not an Article 3 system. It's the legal department for the executive branch, which is federal. So the land district says a division of a state or territory created by federal authority. Land district is created by federal authority in which is located a United States land office with a register of the land office and a receiver of public money for the disposition of public lands within the district. Public lands. When I laid claim to the afterbirth material in my roundabout way, my land was no longer public. It used to be a public easement until I claimed it through Minnesota 220. When I claimed it through Minnesota 220, it was no longer public land. That's when the federal government and the Department of Justice said, this is not a matter for the federal government or the Department of Justice. They actually said, my stuff is no longer public. They even said, use a private attorney if you're going to do anything. I removed my stuff from the charge of the public. Landed, consisting of in real estate or land, having an estate in land. Landed estate or property. A colloquial or popular phrase to denote real property. Landed estate ordinarily means an interest in land and pertaining to lands. Real estate in general, or sometimes by local usage, suburban or rural land as distinguished from real estate situated in a city. Here's what's interesting, the word urbs. Urban. What is urban? Urban, urbs, Latin. In Roman law, a city or a walled town. By the way, the ancient term for paradise, my wife actually found this years ago, but paradise, the ancient definition via Persia for paradise is walled in or walled around. It says urbs. In Roman law, a city or a walled town. Sometimes it is put for civitas and denotes the inhabitants or both the city and its inhabitants, i.e. the municipality or commonwealth. By the way, the District of Columbia is known as a municipality. And then it finally says, by way of special preeminence, urbs meant the city of Rome. Urbs meant the city of Rome. Landed estates court. In English law, tribunals established by statute for the purpose of disposing more promptly and easily than could be done through the ordinary judicial machinery. Of encumbered real estate. Sorry about that. I was trying to turn the page. These courts were first established in Ireland, which being defective. Okay, the purpose of these was to enable the owner or a lessee for any less than 63 years unexpired of land subject to encumbrance to apply to commissioners who constituted a court of record to direct a sale. This court was called the Encumbered Estates Court. A new tribunal called the Landed Estates Court was created, which abolished the former court and established a permanent tribunal. Landed securities. Mortgages or other encumbrances affecting land. Landificus, a landlord or lord of the soil. Landagenmen, in Old English law, a kind of customary tenant or inferior tenant of a manor. Landgabel, a tax or rent issuing out of land. Land grant. A donation of public lands to a subordinate government, a corporation, or an individual, as from the United States to a state or to a railroad company to aid in the construction of its road. See also land patent under patent. Listen, land grant. A donation of public lands. Listen, if I don't lay claim to the stuff that's left behind in the hospital, it goes public. It becomes part of the public through eminent domain. But it says a donation of public lands to a subordinate government, a corporation, or an individual. A grant, a land grant back to you. So the chorion or the maternal that's left behind in the hospital, it becomes public land. And then they grant my own stuff back to me. I'm now using what's already mine, but only through a grant. I have now taken for granted that which was already mine, but yet to be claimed. Now I'm asking permission to use my own stuff. I might even need a license to use my own stuff. It says, or an individual. A donation of public lands to a subordinate government, a corporation, or an individual. By the way, the individual is what? First, middle, last. Landing. A place on a river or other navigable water for loading and unloading goods, or for the reception and delivery of passengers or pleasure boats. The terminus of a road on a river or other navigable water for these purposes. Act or process of coming back to land after voyage or flight. Act or process of coming back to land after voyage or flight. See court. Landrechte. In Saxon law, services and duties laid upon all that held land, including the three obligations called trinota necessitas, quasi-land right. Land, law of, the law of the land. Most people recognize law of the land as the Constitution. Landlocked, an expression applied to a piece of land belonging to one person and surrounded by land belonging to other persons, so that it cannot be approached except over their land. Access to such land will normally be via an easement from surrounding landowner. Do you realize that if I don't lay claim to my property that was left behind, they're going to take and put that property somewhere. And that property is going to be surrounded, it's going to be in a place that is not adjacent to me. It's going to be located somewhere else. And I'm going to have to cross over somebody else's land to get to my property. I'm going to need permission from whoever owns that property, that land, between me and my chorion. I'm going to need permission to whoever owns that property. If I pull that chorion back into me by my claim, I don't have to cross over anybody's land. I don't need permission from anybody when I'm whole, W-H-O-L-E. I don't need permission from anybody because I'm not crossing over any land. It's anybody else's land. Landlord. He of whom land or tenements are holden. He who, being the owner of an estate in land or a rental property, has leased it to another person called a tenant. Landlord-tenant relationship, a phrase used to denote the familiar legal relation existing between lessor and lessee of real estate. The relation is contractual. A lease or agreement, therefore, of lands for a term of years from year to year for life or at will creates the relation. The relation exists where one person occupies premises of another in subordination to other's title or rights and with his permission or consent. There must be reversion in landlord and estate in tenant, transfer of possession and control of premises, and generally a contract express or implied. Listen, when you own all of your land, when you have all of it in your possession, you don't need permission from anybody to do anything. Right now, we experience what feels like slavery because we're not in control of all of our positions. We just need to pull ourselves together. It's called integrity, ultimately. Landlord's warrant. landlord's warrant, a distress warrant, a warrant from a landlord to levy upon a tenant's goods or chattel and to sell the same at public sale to compel payment of the rent or the observance of some other stipulation in the lease. You know, I had a talk earlier this morning with a buddy, and I want to explain a little bit about what's so weird about the idea of a trust, just real quickly. So Debbie and I decide to go on a holiday, and we just I make a call to Brittany, and I say, Brittany, would you mind taking care of our stuff while we're gone? And Brittany says, absolutely, positively, we're good to go. So Brittany comes over to the house, and Debbie and I we're just about to get in the car, and I hand Brittany the keys to my house. I didn't even tell her where we're going. But because she's trustworthy, I hand her the keys to my house. Now, I've now entrusted my property, my house, with Brittany. The beautiful thing is I trust Brittany, so I don't worry about it. Now, Brittany has just become a fiduciary over my property. She has the keys to everything I own. Now, as a good fiduciary, what does she do? Well, she tries to make that property more profitable while I'm away. So she rents out the house and makes all kinds of money with the house. And I could be gone for, 50-plus years. And finally, Debbie and I come home, and as soon as I get home, what does Brittany do? She hands me the keys to my property. It's still my property, but it's been under her care now for many, many years. But while I was away, what did she do? She made my property more profitable, as a good fiduciary would do. So she hands me the keys to my property, my house, and she says, here are the books to what has occurred while you were away. And I said, wow, my house is worth a lot more now than it was when I left. And she says, here's the bank account. And she shows me all the money she made using my house. Now, as a good fiduciary, she's also entitled to management. So she gets paid out of the proceeds, out of the profits. And now my relationship with her as the fiduciary is done. And then I'm left with the profits after paying the management fees. But now I have the keys to my house, and I have all the profits made. What I'm getting at is that's the situation that is going on with our lives. Basically, we have forgotten about that piece of us that was left behind in the hospital. And it went into a trust, a lost and found sort of trust. And what they've been doing is using that property for profitable purposes. They're using our name, i.e. the house, and as security in their agreements with all kinds of other companies and countries and things like that. So Curtis Richard Kallenbach, or the title, the name Kallenbach, the house of Kallenbach, has been securing all these transactions. But because what they're doing, though, is they're making my name more profitable. When I finally get home to lay claim to my house, i.e. the house of Kallenbach, they can take all their management fees, but they have to leave me the profits. I'm the only one that ever truly owns that property. I have just never laid claim to it in a proper fashion. So until I do a proper claim, i.e. Minnesota Rule 220, until I do that, I'm still missing presumed dead. And they're just acting as a fiduciary over that trust property. And it's only held in trust while I'm missing, or gone, or on holiday. Landmark. A feature of the land, monument, marker, or other erection set up on the boundary line of two adjoining estates to fix such boundary. The removing of a landmark is a wrong for which an action lies. building or site having historical significance. Do you realize if you're caught with that name, that landmark, i.e. the name itself, if you're caught out there somewhere with it in your possession, you have removed a landmark for which an action lies? When the cops find you out there in the street using that landmark or having removed it from within the boundaries of the United States of America, that is a wrong for which an action lies. The courts will find it every time. It says a feature of the land, monument, marker, etc. Listen, I put the definition of monument in here because we went over it last week. Because the birth record is a monument of your arrival to the United States of America. And the only way you're going to be able to evidence your arrival to the United States of America is by claiming the position of this monument. It says anything by which the memory of a person, thing, idea, art, science, or event is preserved or perpetuated. A tomb where a dead body has been deposited, that's the afterbirth. What do you think? It's a deposit. In real property law and surveying, monuments are visible marks or indications left on natural or other objects indicating the lines and boundaries of a survey. In this sense, the term includes not only posts, pillars, stone markers, cairns, and the like, but also fixed natural objects, blazed trees, and even a watercourse. Any physical object on ground which helps to establish location of line called for. It may be either natural or artificial, and it may be a tree, stone, stake, pipe, or the like. When that afterbirth hits the ground, it identifies the location. It's a monument to your arrival. It's a claim. If you don't have a way to tie yourself to that monument, i.e. Minnesota Rule 220, if you don't tie yourself to that monument, you are nowhere. The United States of America, the so-called republic, has nothing to do with you at that point. You're making an erroneous claim because you can't evidence it. This is interesting. I put there's a Latin term down below, monumenta quae recorda vocamus sunt, whatever. Monuments which recall records are the vestiges of truth and antiquity. Monuments which we call records. That's your certificate of live birth, the record of your arrival. Is the vestige of truth and antiquity. It goes all the way back to your beginning. When you claim the beginning, you claim everything from that point all the way up to the present moment. For the first time in your life, you now own everything that happened from day one. If you don't have the ability to claim that point in time and space, the only thing you own is what you have today. The moment today passes and today becomes yesterday, yesterday goes into history or into antiquity, and you lose your claim. If you don't have the claim from the point of arrival to the present moment, you have no claim on anything after today. The moment you go to sleep tonight is the moment you lose everything. When you wake up tomorrow, you're starting over. You need to be able to claim the point in time and space of your arrival, because now you own everything from that point up to today, up until the end of today. And when you wake up tomorrow, it'll be today, and you still get to own everything. You will not lose everything that you had in the past. That monument is a memory or a memorial to your life. You own everything as long as you can claim the moment of arrival to the present moment. What I found in the word land measure there, it's funny because I looked at that, all these different measurements. Biblically, the term 144 came, when I looked at 144 square inches equals 1 square foot. I just saw 144 as 144,000, which is biblically how many are supposed to be saved. It was just a weird number to actually see there. Or 12 times 12. Of course, 12 is also the number of what? Anyway, land offices. I better see what time it is. Okay, I'm still good. I think we're going to get through this. Let me keep going. Land offices. Government offices administered by the Bureau of Land Management, established principally in the western states for the transaction of local businesses relating to the survey, location, settlement, preemption, and sale of public lands. It's always public, people, never private. The former primary function of these offices was to administer land grants. This goes back to the concept of the land grant, the public land grants, where there's a separation of church and state. If it's private land, there is no separation of church and state. If you're laying claim to public lands, which is the land that you've forgotten, the land of the lost, land patent. By the way, this is really important because all these people chasing land patents, it says land patent. An instrument conveying a grant of public land, also the land so conveyed. Land patent is only upon a grant of public land. You don't need a patent for private land. It says an instrument conveying a grant of public land. Land poor. The term generically means a man has a great deal of unproductive land. Is the afterbirth unproductive? Can it do anything? It says the term generally means a man has a great deal of unproductive land and perhaps is obliged to borrow money to pay taxes, but a man land poor may be largely responsible. Land poor is not having land. Land reeve, an Old English law person whose business it was to overlook certain parts of a farm or estate, to attend not only to the woods and hedge timber, but also to the state of the fences, gates, buildings, private roads, driftways, and watercourses, and likewise to the stocking of commons and encroachments of every kind, as well as to prevent or detect waste and spoil in general, whether by the tenants or others, and to report the same to the manager of, or land steward, as well as to prevent or detect waste and spoil. There's your afterbirth again. And to report it to the manager or land steward. Land revenues. The term denotes income derived from crown lands in Great Britain. These lands have been so largely granted away to subjects that they are now contracted within very narrow limits. Landrum-Griffin Act, federal statute, enacted in 1959, known as the Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act, designed to curb corruption in union leadership and undemocratic conduct of internal union affairs, as well as to outlaw certain types of secondary boycotts and hot cargo, which is an interesting term, provisions in collective bargaining agreements. Lands, plural. This term, the plural of land, is set at common law to be a word of less extensive signification than either tenements or hereditaments, but in some states it has been provided by statute that it shall include both those terms. Lands, tenements, and hereditaments. The technical and most comprehensive description of real property as goods and chattels is of personality. The term refers to property and land. Under ancient law, the words comprehended only freehold estate and did not apply to easements or other incorporeal hereditaments. Listen, it says lands, tenements, and hereditaments do not apply to easements or other incorporeal hereditaments. Do not apply to easements. So lands, tenements, and hereditaments do not apply to easements. The afterbirth materials and easements. So it is not called land, a tenement, or hereditament. Land tax, property tax. A tax paid upon the legal or beneficial owner. Listen, I've already talked about the fact that there is no trust to a sole owner. When there's one single owner, there is no trust, and if there's no trust, there is no beneficial position. There's no legal position. It's all one position called lawful. There's one lawful owner. There's no splitting of the title. There's no separate position. So there is no possible way for you to be taxed or anything you own to be taxed. Land tax, property tax, a tax laid upon the legal or beneficial owner of real property. Legal or beneficial. There is neither legal nor beneficial position to a sole ownership. So it can't be taxed. Land tenant, the person actually in possession of the land. Fine, last page. I think I'm going to get through it. Land Titles and Transfer Act. an English statute providing for the establishment of a registry for title to real property, and making sundry provisions for the transfer of land and the recording of the evidences thereof. It presents some analogies to the recording laws of the American states, e.g. the Registry of Deeds office in many states. Why does it say American states? For all you people that want to claim to be Americans, you better rethink your position. Because right below that I put it says the Organization of American States. Or the OAS or OEA is a continental organization founded on 30 April 1948 for the purposes of regional solidarity and cooperation among its member states, headquartered in Washington, D.C., United States. The Organization of American States members are 35 independent states of the Americas. I put in the link there, the Organization of American States, and here's the actual definition. The Americas, also collectively called America, encompass the totality of the continents of North America and South America. Together they make up the Earth's western hemisphere and comprise the New World. America, I'm not making this up. The Americas, also collectively called America, encompass the totality of the continents of North America and South America. Together they make up the most of Earth's western hemisphere and comprise the New World. The New World is America, and America is North, Central, and South America. The New World Order land trust. A land trust, this is interesting because I'm in Illinois, is a trust in which corpus consists, corpus means body, by the way. Corpus consists of real estate and in which deed to trustee appears to confer upon him full powers to deal with real estate and complete legal and equitable title to trust property. Isn't it funny? Land trusts require, you can see that there's a split between the legal and equitable title. So far as public records are concerned, trustees' powers are complete. Such powers, however, are in fact restricted by a trust agreement mentioned in the deed in trust. The trust agreement typically vests in beneficiary full powers of management and control. However, beneficiary cannot deal with property as if no trust existed. Such trusts generally continue for a definite term. Listen to this. In the courtroom, it says, beneficiary cannot deal with property as if no trust existed. The very term beneficiary implies a trust. If you're claiming a beneficial position, you're also claiming that a trust exists. And if a trust exists, there's more than one claimant. I never want to be in a beneficial position over my own life, because that actually is a statement on my side that says there's somebody else out there making a claim. I am not the beneficiary to any part of my life. I am the sole owner to my life. All those morons out there claiming a beneficial interest are morons, just like I said, because they're allowing for a secondary claimant to exist. I want to ask each and every one of you that are listening to this, who besides you has a claim upon your life? Land use planning. Generic term used to describe activities such as zoning, control of real estate developments and use, environmental impact studies, and the like. Many states have land use planning laws which are implemented by local zoning and land use laws and ordinances. I'm just going to say this right off the bat. None of this shit applies if it's private. The only thing that you have to differentiate is your land, is the remainder, is the remaining, is the remains in the public, or have you grabbed it up and considered it part of you, the private man or woman? The only way to do that is through Minnesota Rule 220. And by the way, there are only two potential owners to any of that left behind material, you and Mom. The chorion, or the fetal tissue, is you, and the maternal afterbirth material is mother's. One is waste material, mother's, and one is not waste material, you. When you lay claim to the non-waste material called chorion, you're also laying claim to the title. I would love to see anybody make a claim upon that title after you make a claim upon the land, because the land gives rise to the title. I want somebody to be in that courtroom saying that they're laying claim to the waste material called Curtis Richard Kallenbach. That's my mother's side of the equation, because my DNA is not waste material. The maternal afterbirth might be waste material, but my chorion, my DNA, is not waste material. Land waiter. This is interesting. In English law, an officer of the customs house whose duty is, upon landing any merchandise, to examine, taste, weigh, or measure it, and to take an account thereof. What do you think they're doing in the hospital? Don't they measure the metes and bounds? They weigh it. They measure the afterbirth material. Upon landing any merchandise. And finally, land warrant. This is why everybody gets arrested. Land warrant is why everybody goes to jail. A warrant issued at the local land offices of the United States to purchasers of public lands, on the surrender of which at the General Land Office at Washington they receive a conveyance from the general government. See land certificate. The evidence which the state, on good consideration, gives the person therein named is entitled to the quantity of land therein specified, the bounds and description of which the owner of the warrant may fix by entry and survey in the section of country set apart for its location and satisfaction. I'm going to go over this again, because this is your claim to the United States of America. This is your claim to your position within the Republic. The land warrant is the deed that we see as a certificate of live birth. That's the deed that identifies our position within the United States of America. So I'm going to go over this just a little bit. I might go over it by a minute or two, but not too much. Land warrant. A warrant issued at the local land offices of the United States to purchasers. By the way, when you hear purchase, don't think you're buying something. To purchase something is to have hold of it, to have possession of something. So a warrant issued at the local land offices. What's the local land office in my case? It's the county. The local land offices of the United States to purchasers of public land, on the surrender of which at the General Land Office at Washington, they receive a conveyance from the general government. Here it is, the evidence which the state, on good consideration, gives that the person therein named, this is the Minnesota Rule 220 right here, gives that the person therein named is entitled to the quantity of land therein specified, the bounds and description of which the owner of the warrant may fix by entry and survey in the section of the county or country set apart for its location and satisfaction. This is your claim to a piece of land in the United States of America. If you don't have this, if you don't claim this, this warrant will work against you. Because those watching over that land or protecting that land, the warrant will be used against you if you're not the one that has the legitimate claim upon it. If you don't claim that land, the warrant to that land will be used against you as a warrant for your arrest. The land warrant is what they're using to arrest all persons. Wow, did I really get through all this? Holy cow. Okay, so tomorrow, now that we have an idea of what land is, which, again, the land is your physical existence. And your physical existence is what makes up the United States of America. Remember, the United States is a trade organization. It's a commercial endeavor. It's a company. America is a geographic location of North, Central, and South landmasses. But the United States of America is a people. It's an idea where people have agreed to something, and they put something at stake, their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. I actually call it the New Jerusalem, or what I call Israel, the land of milk and honey. And it is, and until you get there, until you lay claim to it, you're outside the pearly gates. And it feels like it. You're not, you're in hell. It's either hell or heaven. That purgatory in the middle is what we're experiencing. We need to claim our piece of ground inside there, which is our physical bodies. It's the land, it's the house of the holy. It's the place where we got to get home to. Our spirits live in our bodies. And right now somebody else says they have the deed to that body. Minnesota 220 gives you the right on paper for the first time ever to prove that that's your house, that it's your property, that it's your land. We're Minnesota 220 people. And on that note, I'm out of here. I'm not going to talk anymore. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow night. Good night.